Hello, good afternoon and good evening. Thank you for joining us today to celebrate International Women's Day. Today, we discuss the pivotal role of education in promoting gender equity in STEM fields. As we delve into today's conversation, let's move beyond cliches and recognize that true progress demands more than superficial acknowledgements. This issue goes beyond the mere opening of doors. It's about dismantling structures that have confined women in STEM for far too long. Education serves as a compass, guiding us through this transformative journey. It's not just about imparting knowledge, but rewriting narratives, challenging biases, and fostering an environment. We're fostering environments where every young mind feels a sense of belonging in the vast landscape of STEM. In my journey, I have witnessed education's profound impact in breaking down barriers. It's not just about textbooks and classrooms. It's about reorienting preconceived notions and creating spaces where curiosity is nurtured, questions encouraged, and the pursuit of knowledge is celebrated. So let us not view education merely as a means to an end, but as a catalyst for cultural upheaval. It is about empowering our Sorry about that. It's about empowering our young minds to understand that diversity is not just a buzzword, but the driving force behind innovation. As we maneuver this complex terrain, let's be architects of change. Let's challenge the status quo, rewrite the curriculum, and ensure that our educational institutions are inclusive and actively promoting an environment where every STEM enthusiast can thrive. In the spirit of International Women's Day, let's pledge to be the force that transforms education from a pathway to equity into the foundation of a world where gender does not limit but empowers. My name is Deborah Ann Albert, and I'm the founder of Young Women Code. Thank you for joining us today. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you so much for the inspiring words, Deborah. That was a really good speech and a great start to our seminar. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Young Women Code Online Seminar. My name is Michelle Lawson, and I'm super thrilled and super excited to be one of your moderators for today's event. I am a second-year student studying computer science at Smith College, and I am personally deeply passionate about women's empowerment in the technology industry and the education industry as well. Through a platform that I've put together, Computer Science Girlies, I strive to provide resources, tips, and encouragement for young women who are pursuing careers in technology. So that's me. And I would love to go on to introduce our esteemed panelists who blessed us with their time and are joining us today. But before we go on to do that, I want to take a moment to hear from our audience and the students and young women who are in the audience today. Feel free to use the chat or the reactions feature and let us know where you're joining us from, what city or country that you're joining us from today. You can let us know in the chat. Let's see. Okay, so Elaine is joining us from Lagos, Nigeria. Hi, Tano. Elaine is joining us from Lagos, Nigeria. Yusni is joining us from California. That's so exciting. I wish I was in California right now. Winona is joining us from Lagos as well. As I would expect, there's quite a number of us from Lagos, Nigeria, which is good. I love that we're spreading education, especially for women in technology in Lagos. So exciting. I also wish I was in Lagos right now. Maybe I'll get to visit at some point. So that's the audience. That's the audience. We're from Lagos. We're from California. We're from around the world. We can now go on to introduce our panelists. Okay. Naomi is also from Nigeria. That's great. That's exciting. Nice. Okay. So we have our esteemed panelists joining us today, and it's fantastic to see that we have such a diverse group of participants listening in to this conversation, to this seminar. Thank you for sharing your locations with us. So without further ado, we're going to go on to introduce the incredible panelists who will be joining us today for our discussion on the role of education in promoting gender equity, especially in STEM fields. First up, we have Dr. Rose Margaret Ekang Itwa. Dr. Rose Margaret Ekang Itwa is a distinguished professor of engineering with over 2 decades of experience in engineering and STEM higher education across the United States, Europe, and Africa. She holds a PhD in cybernetics from the University of Reading in the United Kingdom, making her the first Black woman to achieve this feat, which is super impressive and super inspiring. With a master's degree in mobile and satellite communications engineering from the University of Surrey in the UK, and a bachelor's degree in electrical and electronic engineering from Federal University of Technology in Owerri, Nigeria. Dr. Kengitoa's academic prowess is evident. She has made significant contributions to research in clean technology, energy resiliency, and decarbonization, serving as a 2-time visiting research fellow at the University of California, Berkeley. Her innovative work on smart microgrids for energy resiliency and decarbonization in sub-Saharan Africa has garnered global recognition. Dr. Ekeng Itua's dedication to engineering education and advocacy for women has earned her numerous awards, including the 2022 Distinguished Engineering Educator Award from the Society for Women Engineers and the 2018 Advocating for Women Award from the Society of Women Engineers. She is passionate about giving back to her communities, serving on several boards and leadership roles for organizations like the Silicon Valley Engineering Council and the Society of Women Engineers. Outside of academia, Dr. Kengitwa enjoys exploring diverse cultures through cuisine, art, and travel. She finds joy in amateur painting, art collection, and spending quality time with her family and friends. We're super honored to have her with us today. Next, we have Dr. Christine Sosulski. Christine Sosulski is a leading expert in visualization and learning technologies as a professor at New York University's Stern School of Business, where she teaches MBA, undergraduate, executive, and online students. She teaches essential technology courses for businesses, including visualizing data, Python, dealing with data, databases for business analytics, and R programming for data. In her role as the capstone director for the MS in FinTech program, Dr. Sosulski mentors students through a year-long project that explores cutting-edge financial services and technology. Dr. Sosulski Innovative teaching methods are showcased in experiential courses such as operations consulting and operations in Panama, offering students firsthand insights into business practices and leadership in diverse sectors. As Executive Director of the Learning Science Lab at NYU Stern, Dr. Sosolsky spearheads the creation of cutting-edge online and on-site learning experiences, setting new standards in business education. Her commitment is evident as she guides faculty in integrating learning science with course design, promoting universal accessibility, and fostering an inclusive educational environment. As an advocate for technology's transformative role in learning, Dr. Sosolsky's scholarship delves into the evolution of educational and business technologies. She has significantly contributed to the literature with works like The Essentials of Online Course Design and The Savvy Student's Guide to Online Learning. Her latest publication, Data Visualization Made Simple, embodies her dedication to demystifying data visualization for a broader audience. I love that so much. Dr. Sosolsky holds an EDD, EDM, and MA from Columbia University and a BS in Information Systems and Management and Organizational Behavior from NYU Stern. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Sosolsky. And finally, we're honored to have Professor Monica Greenenboom. Monica Greenenboom graduated with a BS and MS in Electrical Engineering from Montana State University. She worked at Underwriters Laboratories as a project engineer, traveling to Taiwan to work on information technology projects. Then she worked at Hewlett Packard, which you'd more commonly know as HP, for about 15 years. During her tenure, she worked with cross-geographical and cross-functional teams in a variety of roles, including product safety, engineering, and project engineering. Her failure analysis experience prompted her to be a project manager for the printer division in the Americas region. Most of her work at HP was centered on data analysis combined with hardware and software engineering. She moved to Michigan to live closer to family and pivoted her career. She has since spent the last 8 years working at Calvin University, where she teaches in the engineering and data or computer science department. She is also the faculty advisor for the Society of Women Engineers, the student chapter at Calvin University. Monica enjoys music, swimming, and loves Arduinos. I love that. So these are our amazing speakers today. Let's show our excitement and our enthusiasm for our panelists. Feel free to use the reactions feature to show you're excited, show your excitement in the chat. Let's make our panelists feel welcome and appreciated, especially for taking time out of their busy schedules to join us and share their experiences with us today. Throughout the session, if you have any questions, any thoughts, any insights, feel free to drop them in the comment sections, and we'll take the questions in the Q&A session, and the panelists will answer your questions. So we'll be tracking them throughout the session. So we can go ahead and get started if nothing else stops us. And we'll be starting with a panel discussion. So how that would work is I'll ask the panelists some questions and they'll share in with their experiences and their answers to questions. I will direct the questions to specific panelists so that it's easier to get a flow of who's answering at any given moment in time. And then after the panel discussion, we will now open the floor to general questions that are directed to all the speakers, and then we'll finally get audience Q&A and answer the questions that the audience have placed in the comment section. So make sure that you remember to drop your questions. So we can get started. I'll start off with Dr. Rose Margaret. Based on your experience, what specific strategies or approaches have you found most effective in empowering young women to overcome stereotypes and confidently pursue their STEM aspirations? Sorry.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Michelle, for the question. First, would like to say a very big thank you to Young Women Code organization for the invitation to be here to talk to wonderful women and to join this esteemed panel in this very important discussion. So thank you, Michelle and Deborah and the rest of the Young Women Code, and happy Women's History Month to everyone here present. So answers to your question, I think it's really interesting that you kind of framed the question around building confidence, because that was actually going to be my response, that in order to ensure that women in STEM succeed, it is extremely important that we build confidence and create environments and spaces where women can feel that they belong, and so have that inert self-confidence in them to ensure that they continue their journey. Because once confidence is lost, our dreams are lost, and then things start going downhill. But when there's confidence, we have that passion to keep our dreams alive, and there is more certainty for women to persist and stay on in STEM fields. And so the question, I guess, is, so how do we build this confidence? So there are different ways in education that we try to build confidence in women. Number one, it is important to have what I call, or what is widely called, peer mentorships or support groups. And that is why, as a member of Society for Women Engineers, I advocate strongly to have collegiate sections in as many universities and colleges around the world as possible. Because once we have that peer mentorship or support group on campus, or also having employee resource groups, if you're a professional, you have a women employee resource group where you have a circle of support, people that you meet, people that can relate with you, people that you can vent with, cry with, when you're frustrated or going through tough times, and people that can advise and mentor you. So I think that's one. The other one is mentorship, and I think later on we'll talk about that, but just wanted to mention that. And I think also making sure that we create visibility in our curriculum. And I have conversations with my fellow professors at the college in physics and chemistry, and I say it is important to make sure that we increase visibility of women in our curriculum. And how do we do this? Very simple scenarios. For example, if I'm giving an example of, say, certain laws of physics, Newton's laws of physics, and I'm giving an example and saying John kicked the can down the road. And so instead of using John, I could say Jane. And so just starting to change the way that we write things in our curriculum to increase more women, showing examples of women that have done great things in the field is absolutely important. And even roping things in to educate everyone around the issues that women face in the field. For example, in one of my classes, my introduction to engineering class, I have an assignment based on a movie, which is Picture a Scientist. And if anyone has ever watched that movie, it talks about the issues women go through. And so all my students, including the male students, watch this movie and answer certain questions. And so we are educating everyone around issues that create barriers for women and how to overcome them. The mirror, do your superwoman pose, and know that you can do it. You can do it. You are enough. And we need to continue to build this in our education system, and also increasing visibility for women in the field, in our curriculum, and creating those support groups. around. And I know lots of people here from Lagos. I think we have some collegiate sections for Society for Women Engineers at the University of Lagos. And if you are not there at University of Lagos and are interested in a collegiate group from SWE, please reach out and we can support you in creating collegiate groups for Society for Women Engineers.
Thank you so much. That was a very insightful response, especially in your mentioning that even in giving examples and explanations in class, you don't just focus on John did this, John did that, as a lot of textbooks, traditional textbooks tend to do. You diversify the examples so that women can see themselves in this situations. Now, interestingly, Dr. Christine Sosolski, your book, Data Visualization Made Simple, emphasizes clear communication of complex data. And I can kind of see a link between these two methods of education and information. How can this skill, Dr. Sosolski, and data visualization in general empower women in STEM fields to effectively showcase their work and contribute to closing the gender gap in leadership and representation?
Thank you for the question, Michelle. It's a great question. First off, I just want to say I'm so honored to be here amongst such distinguished peers and colleagues and young women. So thank you also for being here. So let me get to the question. First, I think we need to define data visualization. So we all have the same language. Since it's one of my areas, I thought that I just share a definition. So I describe it as a process for representing information visually. And when we break it down into a process, we don't just think data visualization is a chart or graph, which really simplifies what the whole field is, right? It's really a process. And that process has 4 stages. Just like any type of communication, right? You have to define your audience, right? So who's going to be the receiver of this information? Where are they? Are they on Zoom like us today? Are they in front of us? Are we giving a presentation? Are they reading a report in which we are communicating some important insights? So we really have to think a lot about the audience and the context. Second, the data, of course, right? So we want to make sure that the data can actually answer the question that we're trying to ask. And which brings me to the 3rd stage of the process. What are we trying to present? What is our question? And how are we going to present the answer to that question in that chart or graph, which is the 4th part of the process? Picking the right one, right? Bar charts, line graphs, those types of things. So if we agree that data visualization is a process, then I see the field representing such a diversity of skills, right? It's not just knowing how to use certain types of software to build the thing, the chart or graph, right? And there's actually a relatively recent study in the Journal of Educational Psychology, and which discussed long-term success in STEM careers is likely to be predicted by a set of skills, including abilities in language, spatial rotation, math, and more. Therefore, it's probably worth focusing on the diversity of skills available within an individual rather than emphasizing any single quality. And so just by describing the process of visualization, hopefully you've heard, like, there's a lot of areas to focus on. And I see visualization as a leadership skill. In order to lead with data within and across an organization, great leaders are great communicators. So I see visualization as a skill to promote communication as a universal language, right? Bridging communication gaps, enabling women to collaborate with diverse teams and stakeholders, and really have an edge up. It's much easier to communicate the result of a sophisticated data analysis when you level the playing field for your audience and making that insight really visible and easy to interpret by everyone. So including equity across the audience too, and inclusivity, ensuring that everybody understands. And I think that there's such a power in visualization. I can go on a bit more. I mean, if it could facilitate decision-making, right? And if we think about women in leadership roles being able to show data as evidence to facilitate decision-making by themselves, and also together in teams. And then finally, as a tool really for advocacy, thinking about how we as women can use visualization to highlight studies on gender disparities, gender pay gaps, advocating for policy changes. Let's show it in the data.
Thank you. That's a succinct and very insightful response. Honestly, that gives more insight into how we can effectively show data so that it's more understandable, especially when we're talking about considering our audience and leveling the playing field for everybody. Because if it's understandable for a specific group of audience, it can be more easily understandable for the rest of the audience, which is really important in us showing our data to educate and inform people who are taking insight from the data. I would like to go back to Dr. Rose Margaret King-Etwa. You have a proven track record of developing successful partnerships between academia, industry, and government, which I think is a great thing to be able to do, especially when we get like data, like we just talked about, to be able to share to these three fields and areas. So how can these collaborations be leveraged to provide more opportunities and more support for young women in STEM fields?
Thank you, Michelle, for the question. And I'll respond to your question, piggybacking off Dr. Susilski's response and talk about data. And so in the work we do, we use a lot of data, especially across the continent of Africa and Nigeria specifically. For example, data shows that only, I think, less than 15% of engineers in Nigeria are women. And this is even worse than what we have in the US, because I think in the US it's about 18%. And so even have less than that. And so with this very strong data, we're able to go ahead and forge really important industry, academia, government partnerships that would really support women, increasing the number of women in the engineering workforce pipeline. I'll give a few examples of some of the partnerships that we've done and some of the partnerships that I'm involved in currently. So for example, currently we have a partnership with UNIDO. UNIDO is the United Nations Industrial Development Organization in partnership with the Society for Women Engineers Africa, and also the Federal Ministry of Environment in Nigeria. I am honored to be the chair of the work group overseeing a scholarship program, which we have put together to support women engineers going into manufacturing, refrigeration, and air conditioning. And this really is in alignment with the Montreal Protocol to eliminate what we call HFCs. HFCs are one of the key ozone-depleting substances, and they're prevalent in air conditioning systems and refrigeration systems. They are what we call the coolant, but they are creating a counter effect in the environment and causing global warming. And so with the Montreal Protocol and Kigali Protocol, we are phasing out HFCs around the world. And I think Africa is one of the last regions where this is being phased out. And so we have this academia, industry, and government partnership with the government in Nigeria, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and different universities across Nigeria to support women to get into these fields. So the scholarship pays for tuition, supports for internship. So creating internships in manufacturing, refrigeration, and air conditioning, and in the entire field of environmental resiliency for the continent, and also supporting additional training in the field for the women. We have just selected our top 32 finalists, but there's more to come in this field. And so most of the partnerships that I have done have been around, number one, supporting education that women in the field can stay on in education, supporting internships, which is experiential learning, because there's clear evidence that internships helps eliminate the imposter syndrome and increases retention for women in engineering, and also supporting additional support services. I've also got a big program here in the US, partnership with Tesla, which is another interesting industry, academia, government organization in partnership with the city of Fremont, where the biggest Tesla plant is based. And in partnership with my college, I've initiated for us to train the entire Tesla workforce. But we're being strategic and making sure that we prioritize women, because there's a huge underrepresentation of women in manufacturing, even more so. And so just being intentional about that training so that women can have a lot of upskilling and reskilling to get into high pay, high demand jobs. And so if there's anyone here in academia or in industry, I want to say that establishing those industry, academia, government partnerships are really crucial in supporting the workforce. And in so doing, we can really create better ecosystems where we can really support women to go through education, but then to get a job. Because at the end, it is all about socioeconomic empowerment, socioeconomic upward mobility, closing that socioeconomic gap. Because again, research data shows women are underpaid when compared to men. There's lots of data. I think women earn only 80%. The latest data I saw said women earn about 80%, at least in the US, what their male counterparts earn in engineering. And so just supporting women with upskilling, reskilling will also help bridge that socioeconomic gap. So the Society for Women Engineers has lots of resources. And if anyone is interested in scholarships or internships, reach out. Because we've got a few collaborations that I think students can definitely leverage on.
Thank you very much. I've learned some new data today from that response. So thank you for sharing. I do hope that anybody in the audience who's interested in internships or scholarship, like you've mentioned, reaches out to learn more. Now, turning to Dr. Kristen Solsky, I have a similar question. As you have deep expertise in data visualization, learning technologies, what approaches do you take to ensure that the courses and the programs that you oversee at NYU Stern remain aligned with industry trends and data insights that you get? And what best practices do you take to make sure that this happens?
Have to unmute. Thank you for the question. Yeah, my experience in the engagement of women in STEM education has been really positive. I come from the tech world, so or that tech perspective, and also with my education background, I try to put those two things together. And like first off, I think just being in the classroom as a role model for women in technology, being a leader in higher education, having that faith is something that I'm very proud of, and I feel like I serve as a role model for many young women. I mean, since I was maybe 22, I was teaching coding to grad students at Columbia, and I'm still just one of a handful of women in my academic department at NYU Stern. So I feel like I'm very fortunate in this role, and I have an obligation to serve as a mentor, to serve as a role model to young women. And you know, I have this also privilege of being able to teach a lot of these tech courses. And so that showcases these relevant, areas to business and kind of expose all students really to that kind of diversity and hopefully help reduce biases with regard to the type of person who teaches tech, right? And I've learned a lot about my own practice in teaching, and in particular for my students in my first year. And that's really shaped a lot of my teaching philosophy. I learned by doing, and I really wanted to encourage that behavior and encourage the idea that it's okay to test your ideas out, and to create a non-competitive culture in the classroom, unlike the one I experienced when taking computer science courses. And so I wanted to do the exact opposite, right? To create an inclusive culture, to allow for, reduce things like cold calling and allow for things like reflection and preparation before coming to class and participating. So participating, but having to prepare for that participation, I think allows for a greater diversity in voices in the classroom. I've had a lot of success with that. And as I became a more seasoned professor, I focused on much more of an inclusive curriculum design, like we heard, even though those things of just changing names in a case study from male to female, for example, can actually have a big impact in terms of shaping some of those perspectives. So one thing that I did is, in my book, Data Visualization Made Simple, I actually wanted to make sure that it wasn't just my voice. So one of the reasons why I wrote the book is that there's very few women in the field of data visualization, and all the textbooks I was using and articles, many of them were written by men, and so I wanted to change that. And so I wrote my own. But in addition, I brought in voices of practitioners and case studies, and many who are women, showcasing their work and their experiences, and most importantly, their voices. And so I feel like this really shapes how I teach. Is it's not just my voice in the classroom, but I bring in many voices. And through this process, I've also interviewed them and done videos of them, so I can bring them in the classroom even when they're not physically in New York City to join us. And so I feel like that's been very, very positive. And it's really allowed me to reflect. Like every time I make a curriculum decision, I really think about how this is shaping perceptions, how this is building an inclusive classroom. So those are a few things. Also, doing things that are hands-on projects, allowing folks to have their own voice and present in front of the classroom on issues that are important to them. I think that's a pedagogical strategy that has really worked well. And I've seen, especially my female students, them, select really challenging topics and come to class with the confidence to present on those. So those are just a few things.
Those are a few very insightful, very impactful things. I think one thing I'm seeing is that you were able to implement things that you learned from your own experience, from your own learning, in your time as a computer science student. And you're also able to incorporate multiple voices in sharing that with your students, which personally, as a student currently, I think is very helpful. I go to a women's college where the professors tend to be focused more on how to be more inclusive, and they implement some of the things that yourself and Dr. Rose Margaret have mentioned, and they do truly help in feeling more prepared to participate in class. I just wanted to mention that from a student's perspective, these processes that you're implementing are actually really helpful in encouraging our education. I'd like to now ask Dr. Rose Margaret Iking Itwa, in your view, what are the biggest challenges that young women, particularly from underrepresented groups, face in pursuing STEM education and careers? And how can educational institutions or organizational institutions like the Society of Women Engineers create a more inclusive and equitable learning environment for them?
Okay, thanks for the question, Michelle. I'll start with the first part of the question about the barriers and then move on to possible call to actions for educational institutions and other organizations. The barriers, I'm sure some of us know this. First, I think, is just the machismo environment in which women find themselves in engineering. We know engineering generally is very male-dominated, and depending on where you are at geographically, if you're in Africa, race maybe doesn't factor in as a double whammy. It's just gender-based. But if you're outside of Africa, then you have the racial component factoring into. And so as a woman of color in engineering, it's kind of what I call double whammy. You're facing the racial underrepresentation and also the gender underrepresentation in engineering fields. So first of all, I think we need to break down that machismo culture. Sometimes I call it the toxic masculine environment. Masculinity has nothing wrong with it. It's just the toxicity of not creating the space for women in the field. And so simple examples, and this cuts across both industry and academia, for students and also for professionals. For example, even overalls for technicians, the overalls are usually made, they were made for men, really hardly anything there for women. And so we need to start changing the way our lab coats and our overalls were designed. And this is one of the things here I'm really pushing for with any company that my students here go to intern. I ask about the overalls. Hey, do you have overalls for women? Because I do not want my students walking around with sagging overalls that were designed for men. And so we did not create the industry for women. And so we've got to start breaking down those sort of barriers that make women feel like I don't belong here, even with PPE. So an overall is a PPE, but even safety glasses, sometimes we find some safety glasses are too big because they were designed with men in mind, or just basic safety protective equipment in industry need to be tailored for women to make sure it is more inclusive. And again, talking about labs in engineering and science and technology, we've spent a lot of time in our labs. So even the lab environment, usually it's dark blue, etc. And so I started changing the way that our labs look, putting different colors, just changing the environment so that when a woman walks in, they feel like they belong. And that is not just a space that was created for women, for men. And I think Dr. Sosuliski talked about how she changed her pedagogy from making it competitive. And so I think that is also really important. Yes, engineering has a bit of competition, but not the unhealthy type of competition that Dr. Sosuliski is talking about. And so I think breaking down the barrier with the pedagogy, the way that we teach engineering. Generally, lots of engineering courses or prerequisites to engineering are usually very heavy assessment driven, and heavy assessments are really test examinations, etc. And then, research has shown that is no clear evidence of intelligence. And usually women and underserved populations do not fare well in those sort of assessment strategies. And so for me in my classes, I've changed some of my assessment methods to more project-based assessment. They're working on projects, they're doing presentations, they're doing different things that will really showcase their inner talents, their creativity, which is what science and engineering is really all about. And so breaking down the way we assess, breaking down just the environment and making it more inclusive and increasing visibility. And then to the second part of your question, what can Society for Women Engineers and other organizations like Young Women could do? I think what you're doing now is laudable, is great, and these are the sort of things we need to have spaces, safe spaces where women can come together like this, learn from each other, support each other through mentorship, coaching, and sponsorship. That is really crucial. And I think for me, the Society for Women Engineers has provided this platform for me and for my students too, so that we usually have, I think once a month we have WeChat, so Women Engineers Chat, and all my students, we come together in the lab, change the environment of the lab, and we mess up the lab with pizza and cupcakes in the lab and just talk about how classes are going, etc. And we occupy that space. We do fun things with technology. We use soldering, we solder rings. So, I mean, you're soldering, so we solder circuit rings, we like jewelry, we 3D print jewelry and use CAD drawings. And so we start feminizing engineering, or really creating the space that we want to create. I have a saying that goes, I'm not going to wait for you to invite me to the table. I will create my table and then maybe invite you. And so that is what we're doing. We've created our tables and we're inviting people that we think we need there at the table. And so I think Society for Women Engineers, Young Women could just turn things around. Don't wait to be invited to the table. We're creating our table and really starting to influence and change the face of engineering all around.
Thank you so much. That was so insightful. And I can feel a couple of us in the audience and my fellow Medbridger can relate to what you're saying about the lab coats and the PPE. So it's really amazing that professionals and professors like yourself are advocating for the feminizing of these products and these spaces to give us more of a safe space to be engineers who are also women. The next question. I think the next question is for Dr. Sosulski. From your perspective, how can educational systems and institutions better integrate approaches like immersive learning environments, which you champion at NYU Stern, create more inclusive and engaging learning experiences for women in STEM, fostering a stronger pipeline of female talent? Now, this probably sounds similar to the previous question, but just to clarify the difference, you shared with us your approaches in your teaching and learning, but this is more how can the organization create more inclusive and engaging learning experience for women in STEM?
I appreciate the question and also the clarification on the question that we're coming from this organizational perspective. So, I mean, first off, start early. I mean, article after article, it's all about starting early. We know that the gender gap in STEM representation starts early, right? So by middle school, twice as many boys and girls intend to work in science and engineering related jobs, according to one study in 2012. And these differences continue throughout high school courses and college, increasing 5 times more men than women report an intention to major in engineering and computer science. So we have the data. Now, what do we do with it? We start early and we use a pronged approach, I would say, right? Because starting early is going to be great for those women who are younger, but those that have progressed to middle school and high school, we shouldn't turn our attention away from them either. And so we need to not just have one strategy, but to have a series of strategies to address this. So finding ways, you know, at the maybe even the preschool level, right, to have STEM education opportunities present in even those curriculum, to have ways to include parents before their parents around these important issues, to help reduce biases that can start in the household, in the home, and find ways to counter those in the classroom, and also through informal learning opportunities, right? So we have these structures, these educational systems, but looking for other ways to work within our own communities to promote the presence of women in STEM areas, to showcase, to have, and this will be something I'll say in my response to a later question, right? But the idea of being able to have not just role models, but to actually to be able to have those really important stories. We know from being a visualization person, we know, and you know, in business, right, stories do sell. And so being able to have those success stories of women to be available at all levels, right? So from, again, that pre-K on, looking at like high impact areas too. So we know that like it's such an honor here to be here with Rose Margaret, and so coming from engineering and me from technology and computer science, right? These areas are high impact areas, and that's where the gender gaps are growing the greatest, and these areas dominates the STEM workforce and offer high economic returns. And so I don't think I think the value proposition is there. It's just a matter of being able to be strategic about targeting those areas, and then thinking about, you know, as we go on throughout the educational hierarchy, academic leadership matters, right? So closing the gender gap in prestigious academic institutions is essential. So, you know, more female faculty and leaders. So those are just some you know, some ideas there.
Those are great. Thank you so much.
I guess I can start to give Dr. Sosilski a chance to catch her breath since she answered the last question so well. So I think mentorship is key. And I think in the first question, I alluded to this fact that it is really crucial for women in the field to have mentors. I think I've had a mentor since I was 18. Once I knew that I really wanted to pursue engineering, I started having people mentoring me. As I am here today, I think I've got about 4 mentors. So all through my career, I will never know it all. And I need mentors to guide me. And so I think every single woman here should at least have one mentor. And if that is a call to action for everyone, get a mentor. If you can't find a mentor, reach out to me. I'll volunteer Dr. Sosilski, and I think we can either mentor you or find you a mentor, someone that can mentor you. Apart from mentors, it's also important to have coaches, because mentors are people that will listen to you, be general guides, but there are also some specific skill sets that you might want to develop, and you need a coach. Luckily for me, yes, there's some coaches. One coach I had to pay for, but generally I don't pay for my coaches because I tap into my network and ask, instead of being a mentor, could you coach me? So for example, one of my bosses, a man, and just wanted to also say you can have male mentors, you can have female mentors. Really depends on the person's value and the person being in your corner. And so I wanted to really learn how to negotiate and advocate for myself. I knew how to advocate for people generally, but when it came to salary negotiations, advocating for myself, I was not good at all. And so I asked this boss of mine, he was male, my dean at that time, and I said to him, you know what, you're really good at negotiating. Could you teach me how to negotiate and how to advocate for myself. Because I see you advocating for things you want, you put your feet down, you set clear boundaries, etc. Could you help me with that? And he became a coach to me and taught me how to do that and held me accountable in spaces when I wasn't doing that for myself. And so I want to also say you need coaches. It can be your immediate boss, it can be a friend or someone that you see is pretty good at a certain skill, whether it's negotiation skills or advocacy skills, and there's skills that you think you want to learn, whether time management, setting boundaries. And then you also need sponsors. A sponsor is someone that is going to speak your name when you're not in the room. And as you continue on in your career, it is important that you get sponsors. They are your biggest ally. If you're looking for upward mobility, and not even upward mobility, to be honest, just to succeed in your mission or the work you do. And usually I say, sometimes it could be your boss or the boss of your boss, but you need a sponsor, someone that you know has gotten to where you are at and you want to get there, or has a certain influence over a certain terrain that you want to get to. And so some people can just be your sponsors. You tell them what your goal is in life and just say, hey, please, could you help me? If you have any resources, send my way. And they'll send you resources. They will speak your name when you're not there. So those three are really important. And I think Young Women Code can partner with organizations like Society for Women Engineers. We have a great mentoring infrastructure. I think now we even have a mentoring committee for SWE, and also other organizations. I also belong to the IEEE, Institute of Electrical Electronics Engineers, and other organizations, professional organizations like that. They have a lot of mentoring programs that you can easily tap into, but mentoring is really key and important. It takes a village, and so you need your support village to continue to guide you. Okay, great. I think someone says they're a member of Nigerian IEEE. That's good. Yes, those professional organizations have really helped me a lot.
Thank you so much. Dr. Sosofsky, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Oh my goodness, that was amazing. Sponsorship, mentorship,
Okay.
coaching, all those things are essential. And I think Young Women Code can really help with the facilitation of that, and also thinking about maybe doing some, self-development with young women to kind of come up with a plan for this, right? And it's not you want to make sure you find the right mentor, and I think it's okay to outgrow mentors too, right? As you grow and you develop, and you may also want to just consider, also being a mentor, because then you kind of you learn this kind of like different type of empathy, and when helping others, and in some ways that experience is so rewarding. You may recognize the things that are important to you with regard to your career, as you hear some of the needs of others that maybe might have been harder for you to articulate. So I think there's a lot of learning to be happened on both sides, really. And I think there's thinking about, I think, Young Women Code, like finding ways to offer, opportunities for self-development, self-reflection, safe spaces, those things that you've already mentioned, I think are really, really invaluable. And, inviting guests every once in a while, right, to serve as some of those role models, and to have some of those honest conversations.
1000% agree. Thank you. These are such insightful responses. I think Young Women Code is doing a great job right now, having invited guests speaking to us today and blessing us with their experience. This again is a question to both of the panelists. Looking ahead to the future, what are your hopes and your dreams for the future of women in STEM? What concrete actions can we take both individually as young women, as professionals like yourselves, as students, and collectively as women in STEM and women in engineering, to achieve a more equitable and a more diverse future in these fields?
I'm happy to to start this one off and give Professor Rose Margaret a break. Look, I have a few things, right? So I like to see the elimination of the gender pay gap, right? That would be, you know, if I'm looking for and with that, supportive policies for women in STEM, such as parental leave, flexible scheduling, the more anti-discrimination measures put in place to support women in STEM who are also caring for others, maybe a primary caregiver. So having those supportive policies and, you know, to see this greater and encourage this more balanced, greater gender representation at all levels of the STEM fields.
Thank you so much. I think that's all we'll be taking for the panel discussion today. But panelists have been very helpful. Dr. Rose Margaret and Dr. Kristen have been super helpful today, sharing their insights, lots and lots and lots of things that I have learned. And I'm sure the audience have also learned lots of insightful things, lots of data that they can share with their friends, and lots of actionable steps moving forward. We do have a couple of questions in our Q&A that people have. The first question is for, I think, Dr. Rose Margaret. When you were speaking to us on, oops, sorry, excuse me. When you were speaking to us on how we can, like, what role mentorship programs play and access to female role models play, you mentioned coaching, you mentioned mentorship, and you also mentioned sponsorship. So that shows that there's a difference. But according to you, what is the difference between these three things, especially coaching and mentorship? This is a question from Stephanie Ikebudu.
Okay, great question, Stephanie. And thanks for asking for the clarification, because sometimes it might seem as though they're the same. And also wanted to say one person can act in the same capacity, although sometimes it's good to differentiate those. So a mentor is really someone that guides you, that is there for you to talk to, someone that you can vent to, and is there for the long term as someone that can serve as a career guide. So for example, I can ask, oh, well, right now I'm thinking of my next career move. What are your thoughts? What do you think? And they're usually someone probably that has gone down the path that you have gone down. And so you're asking, so what did you do to get to this place, XYZ? Almost like, should I say, your tour guide in your career, and helping you go through your touring, your adventure, and they're there for the long haul. I mean, like Dr. Susili's case said, you cannot grow mentors. So the mentor I had when I was 18 are no longer the mentors I have right now, because at 18, I was figuring out how to get to college, etc. And then after that, I was thinking, okay, how do I become faculty? And then what's the next stage in my career? So they're like your guiding light, your North Star guide, if you want to call it that, to help you navigate your career. Or even if it's your personal life mentors. I also have my personal life mentors, people that have lived on and they're sages and they can advise me to navigate different things I'm going through, whether it's motherhood, etc. in my life. A coach is someone that I identify can help me with a particular skill set. So for example, you can either have a paid coach or an unpaid coach, which are like volunteer people, like the example I gave with my boss, who I saw he was excellent with negotiating and self-advocacy, and I needed to learn that. And I asked him, teach me how to do this. he wasn't necessarily my mentor, and he spent time teaching me. I think we met like twice or three times, and he taught me enough, and that was it. Some people have paid coaches. So for example, you want to get into the C-suite, you want to become an executive, you say, coach, teach me about how to be an executive. And so they start that sort of training. So coaching is what it is. It's like they're teaching you, but not in like the classroom setting, an informal setting, giving you key strategies, tools to get to a particular end goal, a short-term goal that you really want to achieve in your life. So whether it's time management, you can get a coach to teach you how to time manage, and then you have achieved that particular goal that you aspire to achieve. But coaches are free. If you're part of Society for Women Engineers, there are people that can coach you on different things. And sometimes by the time you get to a certain level in your career, you're okay with paying for coaches, because some people will pay for a coach to teach them how to become a president, a CEO of a company. And that is strategic coaching tools, providing you with certain tools, etc. To your coach is not your therapist, they're not your mentor, so they're not going to watch you cry and vent when you're frustrated. No. So when I go for my coaching, I don't go with my frustrations or crying and venting. That's for my mentor. My mentors will hear all my crying, my frustration, etc. My coach is, okay, teach me. And I'm clear-minded, and I learn a particular skill set. So hope that helps.
That helps. That's a very clear, distinguishing explanations. Definitely says thank you. Right, right. Thank you so much. That makes sense. I didn't even realize I had this question until you answered the question, and now it makes so much more sense. A mentor is like a North Star, is like a tour guide, and a coach teaches you a skill set. I love that. Elaine Oduni asks, how do we push through as a woman in STEM in an environment that is not necessarily accommodating to women?
Well, this is the question. This is why we're here. I mean, I think I think we take this large question and we break it down into smaller questions and actions and things that we can do. In terms of our own preparation, our own setting our own goals for what it is that we want to achieve, and carving out those pathways and being resilient and persistent in that process, and creating our own tables. Rose Margaret. I really love that. That way of thinking about carving out our own space rather than trying to fit into another space. And I think that's that seems like a really strong path forward.
Thank you so much. That is it. That is a big question, but you've given an amazing, succinct answer. That is right. We make our own tables, we break the question down, we have actionable steps, but we make our own spaces instead of trying to fit into a certain space that might not accommodate us. Unfortunately, due to time, I can't take any more questions, but I don't want to speak on their behalf, but are the panelists open to being reached out to on places like LinkedIn or email? Yes. Okay. So you can reach out to either or both of them if you have any more questions that we were not able to ask today. We'll now be wrapping up the panel. Dr. Sosolski has put her LinkedIn in the chat if you would like to follow up there. So just driving your awareness to that. As we wrap up this insightful, impactful, and honestly very refreshing panel discussion, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our speakers for sharing their time, for sharing their expertise, and their invaluable insights with us today. Your perspectives have shed light on very crucial, very important aspects of promoting gender equity in STEM fields, and we're truly grateful for your contributions. You can look in the chat. Stephanie is grateful, Naomi is grateful, Elaine is grateful. And I think I speak on behalf of everybody when I say you really truly inspired all of us here, as is being said in the chat. For our audience and our listeners, just wanted to let you know that Dr. Rose Margaret has also put her LinkedIn in the chat if you would like to reach out to her over there. Thank you so much, all of you, for your insightful questions, for your engagement during the Q&A session. You were really participating today, asking really great questions. Some questions I didn't know that I also had until you asked. So thank you guys so much for that. Once again, thank you to our panelists as well. And before we conclude, we encourage our attendees to take a moment to show their love and appreciation for our speakers in the chat box, which you are already doing. The chat box is overflowing with love, appreciation, and things. And I'm so happy to see that everybody here has truly been blessed, inspired, has learned a lot from the discussion today. Thank you to everybody for joining us. I'd also personally like to say thank you to the Young Women Code team for organizing this panel, organizing this discussion, and putting all of it together. Before we all say goodbye, we invite you to stay connected with Young Women Code on our social media platforms for updates on upcoming events, resources, opportunities. You can follow on Instagram, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and you can also check the website at youngwomencode.org, which I will copy and put in the chat in case you'd like to store that somewhere. Feel free to also reach out to their email at info@youngwomencode.org or support@youngwomencode.org. With that, we will be bringing the seminar to a close. I would like to know maybe Deborah has any last remarks.
Yeah, I do. Thank you so much, Kristen. Thank you so much, Dr. Rose Margaret. Thank you so much, Dr. Kristen. Thank you so much, Michelle. I am happy to see that everybody is excited in the comment section. And I'm also happy that Dr. Rose and Dr. Kristen are open to mentoring. So do stay tuned because it's going to be a very, very, very exciting season at Young Women Code. So thank you very much.